Maseches Shviis, and we're learning about Tosas Shviis. Perek Aleph, and as we've said numerous times, Perek Aleph is the Mishnah Rishona. It is, so to speak, the first version of the Mishnah. Rabbi Gamliel Ubeis Dinoi Paskin, like Rabbi Yishmael, who holds that Tosas Shviis is initially Sinai in the oral transmission from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Moshe. HaKadosh Baruch Hu explained that Tosas Shviis, the amount of time that you can't work the field in the 6th year, is only when the Beis HaMikdash is standing. The Beis HaMikdash is not standing, there's no Tosas Shviis, and Shemitah starts Rosh Hashanah of the 7th year. From here of Yameinu, the Beis HaMikdash will be built, B'Ratzon Hashem, today, and we will have a Tosas Shviis. But until the Beis HaMikdash is built, Shemitah begins on Rosh Hashanah of the 7th year. So in the system where there is Tosas Shviis, the Beis HaMikdash is standing, we're learning about 3 trees in a Beis Sa'ah. A Beis Sa'ah is 50 amos by 50 amos, 2,500 square amos. If there are 3 trees, if there are not 3 trees, only 2, the conversation doesn't even begin about what you can do in the 6th year. You can plow the field only until Pesach. There are two different deadlines. One is Pesach, one is Shavuos. And that's a rabbinical deadline. So if you have a halachically defined stay Elan, you can plow that field until Shavuos. If you don't have a halachic stay Elan, then the default halacha is you have a stay Lavan, you have a field of beans or grain. It could be that there are 3, could be there are 9 trees in there, but if each tree doesn't give off that shear of Shishim Sa'bi Talki, what we called hypothetically the 1 pound of fig cake, if you have 3 trees in a Beit Sa'ah and each one cannot produce 1 pound of fig cake, you don't have a halachic tree field. What you have is the default field, a stay lavan, a grain field. A grain field can be plowed in the 6th year until Pesach. That's it. So if you have 3 trees, 4 trees, 5 trees, 6 trees, 7 trees, 8 trees, 9 trees, stop. Anywhere from 3 to 9, each tree must be able to give off a pound of pressed fig cake. If each one of the trees, whether it's 3, 5, 7, 9, whatever it is, if each one can give off a pound of fig cake, you can plow the field in the 6th year till Shavuos. If one of those 9 trees or one of those 7 trees cannot produce that pound of pressed fig cake, you cannot plow the field till Shavuos. You can only plow the field in the 6th year till Pesach, and then between Pesach and Shavuos, you can plow that field litzarcham, just for the need of the tree itself. We learned that means the area where the branches spread out, plus an amma for the person who's picking the figs, plus an amma so he can keep his basket to put the figs in on the floor. That halacha is for 3 through 9 trees. Last time we learned that if you have 10 or more trees, that was on page 393 of the Mishnah Behira, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Dalet. Once you have 10 or more trees in the Beit Sa'ah, then you can plow the whole Beit Sa'ah until Shavuos for those trees. And it doesn't make a difference anymore whether the trees produce the pound of pressed fig cake or don't produce the pound of pressed fig cake. It doesn't make a difference. So here are the halachas that we have so far. You have a Beit Sa'ah. In that Beit Sa'ah, you only have 2 trees. Conversation doesn't even begin. It's not considered a tree field, and you can plow the field in the 6th year up until Pesach. That's it. In Bates, you have 3 trees up until 9 trees. If each of the trees can give off a pound of fig cake, you can plow that field until Shavuos, and that's it. After Shavuos, there's no plowing in the 6th year, even in a field tree of fields. If you have between 3 and 9 trees in a Beitza, but one of them can't give off the pound of fig cake, then you can plow the whole field until Pesach, and then between Pesach and Shavuos, you can plow around each of those trees only with the minimum share of what we call sarcham. If the field of the Beitza has 10 or more trees, then you can plow the whole field up until Shavuos, even if some of the trees don't give off the pound of fig cake. And these are the shiurim that the Rabbanan gave to this, and it's based upon their logic of how much do you need to plow a tree field in order to benefit the trees for the 6th year. In other words, we learned out the rule in Mishnah Dalet, Machlokas Rabbi Akiva, who learns it out from a pasuk, those famous 3 words, Bechorish V'Kotzer Tishbos, or according to Rabbi Yishmael, it's Halach L'Moshe Misinai. Either way, there's a rule of Tos V'Shviis. Tos V'Shviis means either it's a biblical prohibition, Rabbi Akiva, or it's an oral Masorah to Moshe Rabbeinu, Rabbi Shmuel. The Rabbanan then took the Tos V'Shviis and made deadlines to it of Pesach and Shavuos. The logic there is, as we mentioned, Nire Kemasaken L'Shviis. While you're plowing in the 6th year, and it's self-evident that what you're doing is to help the trees grow better for the 6th year fruit, that's fine. But once there comes a point, whether because of the size of the field, whether because of the number of trees in the field, or as we're going to see today, because of the age of the trees, where it becomes self-evident that there's no point in plowing the field anymore for purposes of the fruit on the tree of the 6th year. The only possible purpose to continue plowing the field, either because of the size of the field, the size of the trees, the age of the trees, is self-evident that what you're doing is you're preparing the field so that it's better for the 7th year. That's where Tos V'Shviis kicks in. You cannot do things, whether it's after Pesach or after Shavuos, depending what the situation is. You can't do things after Pesach and Shavuos in the 6th year, while the Beis HaMikdash stood, that it is evident that what you're doing is not going to help the fruits on the tree of the 6th year. You're now in preparation for the 7th year. You can't do these things in the 6th year after Pesach or Shavuos, depending upon what situation, if it's preparation for the 7th year, and that's when Tos Shviis triggers. And as we mentioned, what does plowing have to do with making fruits on growing on a tree better? We always think about you plow a field before you want to seed it. So you turn the soil or till the soil, you put the seeds in, you cover it up with dirt, the rain comes, etc. What does plowing a field, have to do with fruits on a tree? So Chachamim understood how the farming system worked, how agriculture worked, and they understood that a tree field needs to be plowed. You have rain only for a certain amount of time in Eretz Yisrael. The rain that's the rain basically, Pesach comes, or around Pesach comes, and that really ends the rain season, and you don't see rain. Rarely you can, but you don't see heavy rains until the next fall season. So you have this water that has been absorbed into the ground during the rain season in Eretz Yisrael. The farmer wants to make sure that all that moisture goes deep down into the ground so that it can reach the roots and can sustain the roots and thereby sustain the tree. So they would plow the field at different times so that they till the soil and the moisture will go deeper down to the roots of the tree. Once certain periods of time came, Pesach, basically the rains are going to stop. There could be some moisture left in the ground between Pesach and Shavuos from rains before Pesach. So Chazal set up a system. Grain field, bean field, you don't plow after Pesach. A tree field that really needs more water, trees need more water, you can continue to plow until Shavuos, but only if it's a halachic tree field, and then you have all the halachas. Less than 2 trees, 3 trees in the Beit Sa'ah. Do they each produce 3 until 9? Do they each produce the pound of fig cake? Over 10 trees in the Beit Sa'ah. It doesn't make a difference if it produces the pound of fig cake or not. So that's where we are, and that's the logic that Chazal used to interpret Tosfos Shviis. So now we're in Perek Aleph Halacha Vav. I'm sorry, Perek Aleph Mishnah Hey, page 394 in your Behira. Shlosha Ilano Shvel Shlosha Anoshim. You have a field that's a Beit Sa'ah, and in this Beit Sa'ah there are 3 trees. Okay, condition 1's been satisfied. Beit Sa'ah, 3 trees. We can now begin the conversation. Is each tree producing a pound of pressed fig cake? But each of these 3 trees belongs to a different person. And each of the trees independently produces a pound of pressed fig cake. Is it a tree field, or is it not? There's no one person that owns 3 trees. So the Mishnah says, Hare'elu mitztarfen. You can consider each tree in combination with the other. You put them together. We make believe the 3 trees are owned by one person. And you can plow the entire Beit Sa'ah until Shavuos for the sake of those 3 trees. So even if the 3 trees in the Beit Sa'ah are owned by 3 different people, we still consider it a halachic tree field because it's a Beit Sa'ah. It has 3 trees, and each tree is giving off a pound of fig cake. The fact that each tree is owned by a different person does not change that halachic status. It is a tree field. Now the Mishnah asks a question that's nogeya all the Mishnayos that we learned till now. How much has to be between each tree? You have 3 trees in the Beit Sa'ah, 5 trees in the Beit Sa'ah, 6 trees in the Beit Sa'ah, 9 trees in the Beit Sa'ah. How much room has to be between each tree? Or can the trees be clumped on each other? And Rabbi Gamliel answers, Rabbi Gamliel Omer Kadesh Yehe Habakar over Bekaleb. In order for, we'll call it the oxen, to be able to walk between the trees with the plow attached to it. So if you take a look at picture 14 on page 395, that's the way they used to plow. 2 oxen with a yoke on them. The plow was behind the oxen, and when there's enough room between the 3 trees that those oxen, the 2 oxen and the plow behind it can walk between the trees, which we are taught means 4 amos. It's a minimum of 4 amos, or give or take 8-9 feet between each of the 3 trees, or each of the 5 trees, or each of the 8 trees. There has to be at least that measurement between each of the trees. That's a new condition for it to be a tree field. So if you take a look at picture 14, page 395, underneath the picture it explains it. Rak shehabokar v'kelav over bein ilan le'ilan. Only when the oxen and the plow can walk between each tree. Mutter lachrosh et kol beit hasa'ah b'shvil ha'ilanos. Only then can you plow the whole field for the ilanos. What's the logic here? Let's take a look in the Rav on page 395, top right-hand side of the page. Kimlo bakar v'kelav, tzemed bakar, 2 oxen, im ha'ol with the yoke, v'hainu arba amos. That's 4 amos in width. Avo pachos mikan, but if it's less than 4 amos, the trees are literally like on top of each other. There's less than 8 or 9 feet between the trees. Leme'akar kaimi. At some point, we know that one of those trees is going to have to be cut down because the trees are too tightly planted. The roots are going to interfere with each other. The farmer is going to have to cut down some of those trees. They're not going to grow well. Mi'akar kaimi. They are in a stage where we know some of them are going to be uprooted. Ve'ein charshin b'shvilam. Since we already know that it's today or tomorrow, in a week or in a month, 1 or 2 of those trees are going to have to be cut down. And since we know they're going to be cut down, there's no purpose in plowing in the 6th year for their benefit. And therefore, we go back to the rule that you cannot plow for them, which means you can't plow for them in the laws of Tos v'Shviis. So you can plow these trees until Pesach. Once Pesach comes, Tos v'Shviis clicks in, and you can't plow this Beit at all. Finished. Why? Because there's no point in plowing. What are you plowing for? The trees? They're going to be cut. So now we have a new condition. Let's look at our condition chart, so to speak. 3 trees in a Beit Sa'ah. Now it could be 6 trees in 2 Sa'ah. Again, it's proportional. But we don't discuss we don't even begin the discussion until there are 3 trees. 3 trees in a Beit Sa'ah. 4, 8, 9. Anywhere between 3 trees and 9 trees in a Beit Sa'ah, if each tree can give off a pound of fig cake, pressed fig cake, and there's 8 to 9 feet, 4 amos between each of those trees, it has the halachic status of a tree field. You can plow the entire Beit Sa'ah until Shavuos. If you're missing one of those conditions, you have 5 trees, 8 trees, 9 trees, and they can produce, one of them can produce a pound of fig cake. One of the 8 or one of the 9 or one of the 5 trees can't produce that pressed fig cake of 1 pound. You don't have a tree field. And therefore you can only plow that Beit Sa'ah until Pesach, the whole Beit Sa'ah. And from Pesach to Shavuos, only that limited area around the tree. At the point where the trees are 10 or more in a Beit Sa'ah, we don't look at whether or not each of them can produce a pound of figs. Let's take a look so we can understand what we're talking about at page 390. Picture number 2 in the Maseches. Page 390 in the Behira. Just to get an idea of what we're talking about this Beit Sa'ah. Picture number 2 shows you a pretty big field. It's 50 sa'ah by 50 sa'ah, 2,500 square feet. It's showing you 3 trees. Condition 1's been met. Each of those trees can produce a pound of pressed figs. And that's why you have the arrow at the picture. Kol ilan roy lasos kikidavela. Each one of those trees is able to produce the pound of fig cake. Now we're adding in Rabban Gamliel. Each of the trees has space between the next one of 4 amos or 9 feet. Because we now have all the conditions met, the entire field of picture number 2, you can plow the entire field. That's a huge amount of space that is not near the trees. But you can plow that entire area in the 6th year until Shavuos. Chazal said that 3 trees that can produce that amount, that have 4 amos between them, you can plow the entire field to get the moisture at the top levels of the soil to the bottom levels of the soil. And by doing that, you'll be helping those 3 trees, even though it looks like, wow, this is a real big field. If I go to the corners of the field, why am I plowing the corners of the field for the trees that are in the middle? That's what Chazal set up. That's how the system worked. You can plow the whole Beit Sa'ah for the 3 trees in the 6th year until Shavuos. If one of those conditions is not met, then you go to the rule on page 395. I'm sorry, you go to the picture on page 391, picture 6. Again, you have a field that's a Beit Sa'ah, like picture number 5 on page 391. You have the 3 same trees, but one of those trees can't produce the pound of pressed fig. Therefore, it's not considered a halachic tree field. You can only plow that Beit Sa'ah, that whole area can only be plowed until Pesach. From Pesach until Shavuos, you can only plow picture 6, right underneath the branches of the tree, and 2 amas outside the branches, 1 amma for the person standing there who's picking, and 1 amma for his basket. Okay, those are the 2 possibilities. You have a whole Beit Sa'ah with each tree producing the pound of fig, pressed fig cake. There's 4 amos between each tree. You can plow the entire picture number 2 on page 390 until Shavuos. One of those conditions is not met. One of the trees can't produce the pressed fig cake of a pound, or each of them can produce it, but there's not 4 amos between each tree. You can then only plow, well, I shouldn't say that. Let's say the case is that you can only, you have 3 trees in a Beit Sa'ah, and you have 4 amos between the trees, but each tree can't produce a pound of fig. Then you can plow the whole field till Pesach, and from Pesach till Shavuos, you can only plow picture 6, that limited area. What happens if each tree can produce the pound, but there's not 4 amos between each tree? Then we consider it, so there are 2 cases, okay? There are 3 cases. One where all the conditions are satisfied. 3 trees, Beit Sa'ah, each of them produces the pound of figs, and there's 4 amos between each tree, plow until Shavuos of the 6th year. Case number 2, you have 3 trees in the Beit Sa'ah, and one of the trees cannot produce the pressed fig cake. You plow until Pesach, and between Pesach and Shavuos, you plow the limited area. Case number 3, you have 3 trees in the Beit Sa'ah, or 5 trees, or 8 trees, and there's not 4 amos between each tree. Then we say leme'akar kaima. Some of those trees are going to have to be chopped down, and in the 6th year you can only plow until Pesach. After Pesach you can't plow because some of those trees are going to be cut down. Okay, so that's Tos for Shviis in terms of trees, mature trees, and that's why the Mishnah used the word Elan, a tree. A tree means a mature tree. What age is a mature tree? Everybody be patient, please. We're going to get to that. But now the Mishnah introduces what is the halacha of a netiyah. A natia is a young tree, quote unquote, a sapling. How old is a sapling? Again, we're going to get to it. What's considered a young tree? What's considered an old tree? But here we have a new rule, Mishnah Vav, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Vav, page 395. Eser netios, you have 10 young trees, mefuzarot betoch beit sa'ah, and they're spread out. That's a key part of the halacha. They're spread out in the Beit Sa'ah. You can take a look at picture 15. You can't have them like we saw mature trees. Mature trees, you can have 3 trees near each other. We've seen that in the pictures. As long as there's 9 feet between each tree, it's a tree field. Now we're talking about saplings, netios. That if you have 10 saplings in a Beit Sa'ah, and they're spread out, Chorshin kol Beit Sa'ah b'shvilam ad Rosh Hashanah. Here you can plow the entire Beit Sa'ah until Rosh Hashanah. In other words, there is no halacha of Tosfos Shviis about plowing what we call a field of Eser netios. This is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's something the Gemara talks about in several places. This was orally transmitted to Moshe by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a field of saplings, which means they're young baby trees. Young baby trees need to get as much water as they can get. They're just starting to grow. They need to get as much water as they can get. So therefore, you're allowed to plow a field of 10 netios. What about 9? What about 8? It doesn't have the status of Eser netios field. If there are 10 and it's a Beit Sa'ah and they're considered saplings, you can plow the entire field so you can till the soil so that whatever moisture is still there, you can get it to the roots of these young trees and help them grow. Help them grow. In the 6th year, you're helping them for the 6th year. They need as much water as they can get. This is called the Eser netios halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So Eser netios mefuzaros betoch Beit Sa'ah. You have 10 young trees spread out in a Beit Sa'ah. Charshim kol Beit Sa'ah b'shvilan. You can plow the entire Beit Sa'ah for the Eser netios ad Rosh Hashanah. Please, everybody, stay patient with the numbers. You can see from the Ilanot that we've been dealing with each day. We've been building on the halachas, and you can see today we added a new condition. There has to be 8 or 9 feet, Dalet Amos, between the 3 trees. The Mishnah is going to develop each stage of the halacha. Eser netios mefuzaros betoch Beit Sa'ah, Charshim kol Beit Sa'ah b'shvilan. Ad Rosh Hashanah. You can do this all the way to Rosh Hashanah for 10 young trees in a Beit Sa'ah. No Pesach deadline, no Shavuos deadline until Rosh Hashanah. Let's take a look at Yud Aleph. At the top of the left-hand side of the page, there's the Iker Tosfos Yom Tov. In Yud Aleph, the Tosfos Yom Tov explains Ad Rosh Hashanah. Loshen Harash. Rash is a famous commentary in Seder Zroyim. Eser netios, this halacha of 10 young trees, halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Gemara Shalom taught this to Moshe. It's not written in the Torah, it's an oral transmission. The chasa ha-Torah al mamoinam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has Rachmanis on Jewish money. We had discussions about this rule in Masech Midas and in Masech Tamid. HaKadosh Baruch Hu chas al moinam shel Yisrael. Remember, we talked about 2 rules that are 2 sides of the coin that are opposite rules. Inside the Beis Hamikdash, sometimes we have a rule. Ein aniyus b'mokem ashiris. You don't show any form of quote-unquote cheapness or poverty where in the king's palace. You're in the king's palace, the Beis Hamikdash. We do what we need to do with gold, with silver, and we don't scrimp on what we spend. This is the palace. On the other hand, we found times that inside the palace, that the Rebbeinu Shalom has Rahmanas on Jewish money and tells us not to spend additional money in the Beis Hamikdash. So there are two sides of the coin. When do you say spend it because ein aniyus b'makam ashiris, and when do you say don't spend it because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has Rahmanas on Jewish money? Chazal defined those rules, and we saw some places this way and some places this way. The Rashi explains that this halacha l'Moshe Sinai of the saplings is based upon this concept. You have 10 baby trees, 10 saplings. They need as much water as they can get. Shemitah is now coming. There's going to be all kinds of prohibitions on working these trees and watering these trees. There'll be limitations. You don't want them to die. They're baby trees. So therefore, the Halacha L'Moshe Sinai said that this type of field with 10 baby trees, you can plow them to get the moisture to the roots, plow it all the way till Rosh Hashanah of Shviis. I'm continuing in the Iketos V'Syontif, She'im lo yachrosh lahen, if you don't plow the field the whole 6th year for them, mis yaboshos, that's, we're flipping out to page 396, they will dry up, their baby trees. The ein kocham yafa kisakenos, because these young trees don't have the strength of older trees that can be sustained through plowing until Shavuos, and they can then go through the rest of the 6th year and the 7th year. These trees need as much water as they can get, and therefore we don't stop you from plowing in the 6th year. For the Eser Netios, Halacha L'Moshe Sinai, you can plow all the way until Rosh Hashanah. Now, again, everybody needs to be patient. Everything's going to be defined. What's considered a young tree? What's considered an old tree? So just for a heads up, if you go to page 397 in your Mishnah Behira, Mishnah Ches, the Mishnah asks the question, Ad Emasai Nikru Netios. How long is a tree considered a sapling? How long is a tree considered a baby tree, so that the rule of Eser Netios clicks in? Until when? So Mishnah is going to give us the definitions we need. But for our introduction to Yetzer Hashem Sunday, when we pick up with Perek Aleph, we now have a new rule called Eser Netios. We've been learning about Ilanot, mature trees. Mature trees first they have to be 3 in a Beit Sa'ah. Each of them has to give up a pound of fig cake. And that's and they also have to have 4 amas between them, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 trees. You can be choresh, plow the whole Beit Sa'ah until Shavuos. One of the trees can't give off that pound of fig cake. You can plow only till Pesach, and from Pesach till Shavuos only the minimum shear around the tree. If the trees don't have 4 amos between them, you can plow the field until Pesach, and that's it, because one of those trees is coming down. That's the tree rule. Now we go to the sapling rule, which we just started today. Halacha L'Moshe Sinai, Eser Netios, spread out, 10 saplings spread out in a Beit Sa'ah, plow the whole Beit Sa'ah until Rosh Hashanah, but it has to be spread out, and we'll learn more about that in Yetzer Hashem on Sunday. The Mishnah will explain what spread out means. If it's not spread out, again, you don't have the halachic Eser Netios field.